Welcome to our third session, How to Land a Visa-Sponsored Role in 2025. It's our final workshop, day 3, negotiating sponsorship and getting the offer. Today, we are going to be discussing everything you need to know to negotiate sponsorship and ideally land that job offer. We will also have Migrate success stories be joining us on the call, and we will be doing a lot of really exciting things at the end. So please do stay until the end so that you get the most value out of us and out of our time and out of everything that we've done so far. So first things first, what are we going to be covering? So we've actually added more material to the agenda. So we're going to quickly touch up on the Migrate story, just in case you're joining us for the first time, you want to know who we are and what we've done so far. We're going to discuss the UK job market and the sponsorship landscape. We're going to talk about how to answer the question, which I think many of you will know what that is. We're going to discuss why companies hesitate to sponsor, how to convince employers to sponsor, how to be the right candidate and get sponsored, and also have our Migrate success stories join us in around an hour. And then we will have time for Q&A as well. So Rim's journey before Migrates. Do you want to quickly recap, Rim, who you are and your story?
Absolutely. For all the first timers here who I have not met yet, so I am one half of Migrates. I came to the UK around 9 years ago. I initially came as an exchange student. Before that, so I was born and raised in Morocco. I actually traveled quite a bit, and then so when I came to London, I really, really loved like the feel of the city, and just it actually felt home like the first time, and I think that truly resonated with me, which kind of got me started on this whole sponsorship journey. So right after I graduated my master's in computer science, I started with an internship in data science, and that's how I got my first sponsored job with Carwow. I actually had to convince them to get a license to sponsor because at the time they did not have that. I stayed with them for 3 years, and I know that someone mentioned changing employers and their skilled worker visa. So actually I got redundant, unfortunately. I got made redundant after from my first job, and so it was like a very hard period for me to navigate going from one sponsored employer to another. But luckily I did make it through that period. And then I got sponsored 2 more times after that by both Clippings, who's a marketplace that works with designers. They got acquired. And then Go Cardless, which is a fintech in the payment space. I've only ever been on skilled worker visas for like the last 7 years. Around, I think December 2022, I got my ILR, and they're the 5-year route visa, the 5-year route track. And then 1 year after that, I got my British citizenship, which was actually earlier this year. So that's the kind of little TLDR about my origin story, but also more importantly, my sponsorship journey. Karina, do you wanna go next?
Awesome. Thanks, Rem. So my story, I am Canadian, but I was born in Russia and I grew up in Israel. I really understand the immigrant journey because I have myself, lived in many different countries and had to immigrate with my family. I moved to the UK on my own when I was 16. I was sponsored 3 different times by 3 different employers. I started out in the corporate world. I was sponsored by a company called FTI Consulting. I then managed to convince another company to get their license to sponsor, even though I only had 2 years of experience. It was U Agency. And then I actually joined Clavio on my youth mobility scheme visa because I was during the pandemic. It's a long story. I won't get into it. I was at Clavio for 8 months, and then I joined Cedars, and I was able to convince them to sponsor me, and I got indefinite leave to remain after 12 years of living in the UK. I also interned at Deliveroo and Dow Jones whilst I was studying at the University of Edinburgh. And I just want to kind of reiterate, I had no network, no connections, no people in the UK. I had to really do all of this myself. And, it's a big reason why Rim and I did start Migrates is because we know how difficult it is to be doing this journey on your own. So that is essentially the backdrop to the Migrate story. That's who we are. We are really specialists and we know the ins and outs of this process. We combined forces together to build Migrates. We started out by creating content which was free and on TikTok, and then we met one another and decided, let's actually build a solution, a product, and a community that can help solve this problem or at least alleviate some of the concerns. So what we do, we have a community platform which is full of coaching. We do webinars, we review people's CVs and their LinkedIn profiles. We have employers that come on and do talks to our community. We have recruiters, we have lawyers that work with us, we have other career coaches. And we also have a job board of roles from companies who sponsor. That job board is now over 10,000 roles, and it is part of the Migrates solution. And our overall goal is to really bring people together. We've had 1,000 people join us since we started. We're currently at an active 300 member number. And yeah, that's kind of a little bit about what Migrates actually is. Rim, I think, is going to show you the job board just so you have an understanding, because this is important for understanding which company sponsors, which companies don't, and how likely they are to sponsor, which is kind of what sets us apart. Rim, are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead. Can you guys see my screen? Yeah.
Yes.
So given that today is on the topic of sponsorship, it only felt right to take you guys through what I think is one of the most important features of like what we have built so far inside Migrates, which is essentially this job board that you're looking at. And more importantly, so can someone like give me a role title that they're looking for at the moment? I know that we get a lot of like data analyst, and I wanted to show you guys like some of the kind of core cool features that you can use our job board for. And my favorite is essentially this system of like sponsorship tags, which you can see here. So we have 3 tiers: a maybe, a likely, and a guaranteed. And the really cool thing is that for any role title that you're actually look for, we have a system of tags. So you can see which ones actually come with a higher likelihood of sponsorship, but also more importantly, we have different levels of seniority as well. So I know that typically a lot of people in our audience are like under this kind of entry level tag. And so essentially when using our Migrate job portal, one, not only this gives you like all the roles that have been published by companies that have a license. So that's something that we have already checked for you. You don't have to do that manually yourself. I remember the hours that I spent doing this. But then more importantly, we also do like a little bit of kind of AI sprinkle. We analyze the job descriptions, and then we come up with a classification process whereby we're able to give you guys, like indication on where it is worth spending your time applying to these different jobs. So yeah, we do cover a lot of different role titles. So, yeah, we have like a lot of them, which you can always kind of add to within our community. So like if there's any role title that's not available at the moment, we scrape around like 70 plus of these role titles, but we're always kind of adding more to that list.
That leads me to our achievements, which we get lots of people getting interviews from our job board. We've helped almost 50 people now land visa-sponsored roles, 3 of which will be on the call later today. 5 of those people have been outside of the UK. 1 of them will be joining the call today as well. She's from Colombia. And we've actually helped 4 employers. So we've placed talent in these companies and we've helped them get their sponsor licenses, because we also have legal people within our business as well that assist in this process. So we really are trying to become the one-stop shop solution for employers and talent alike. Okay, cool. Make sure you stay to the end for a very special gift. So please stay, and you can get access to some awesome stuff at the end of this call. Before we start, let's review the Resling submission from day 2. Now, because this presentation is 109 slides, I think I'm not going to actually review this person's presentation on the call. I will give them feedback off the call. But thank you so much for your submission. Debbie, congratulations. You've won a free 1-month membership to Migrates. Thank you for doing that. We're so happy to have you. We'll send you the details to join us after the call. Now let's get to the juicy bits, why we're all here. The UK job market and the sponsorship landscape. I would be doing a disservice if I didn't cover some of what's happening and what has happened previously. So this is the reality for international talent. The stats that you need to know. There's 120,000 companies that sponsor. There's 250,000 skilled worker visas that were issued in 2024. 2% of UK companies have a sponsorship license, and that is a really small number in comparison to all the companies that exist in the UK. 70 companies get a license daily, and there's 10,000 roles on the Migrates job board. So this is all the stats that you kind of need to know about what's available to you and where you're going to have more chances. Of course, for some people, this stat is actually very interesting because convincing an employer to get their license is something that is available to many as well. How many people here have dealt or seen the unfortunately we do not offer visa sponsorship and have no future plans to do so every day? Yeah. Sorry, guys. Okay. Awesome. I get it. We're all really tired of the current situation. KPMG, many corporates have decided to, completely stop sponsoring international talent. Tougher student visa rules have meant that net migration has dropped. I can go on a tangent about the Home Office. I think if you follow me on TikTok, if you're here from TikTok, I discuss a lot of the legal stuff quite a bit, and I have a lot of strong feelings about the Home Office. But the reality is that it is not the most friendly market to international talent at the moment. However, there's also another reality. There is hope for the future. And in literally less than 2 weeks ago, there was an article published on the FT about how UK banks are actually lobbying to hire more foreign talent. So that is not roles in construction or healthcare or retail, but actually in corporate roles. The UK is dealing with significant labor shortages. And the UK government has actually put a ban on stopping companies from telling people to pay for the whole license, which is actually a good thing because it does eliminate how much abuse you will face as a international talent. The UK government is also going to be publishing a white paper later this year, which is going to be discussing the current rules and the current system in place. For those that don't understand this transition, what happened is that the Conservative government put in place very strict rules, and then a few months later, the Labour Party took over, and they are kind of in this catch-22 situation where they're trying to lower migration, but they're also dealing with shortages in skills and the fact that many companies are now saying, listen, the UK isn't as attractive anymore, and just post-Brexit issues. So there is some hope. This is a good sign. This is actually a very good sign that the job market might start to eventually favor more international candidates. And that's what we're all kind of hoping on as well. And migreats members still get sponsored. So these are some of the logos of companies that people have been sponsored in. And I actually put Microsoft at the end because I want you to understand that many of these companies you would have never heard of. Like, you would have literally never heard of them before because they are small businesses and companies where they might have only just gotten the sponsor license for the talent. So this is to give you hope because, where you might be looking, which is like the bigger guys, and this is what we covered in day one, that might not always be the place where you will find the role with sponsorship. And, we've got 50 success stories. They work at many companies. Not all of them are companies that you would know. So now that you know the UK job market, we are going to answer that crucial question, or we're going to help you answer that crucial question.
Which is the infamous, do you need sponsorship? And we thought it only actually made sense and it felt right for us to address it because we get so many questions around this from our Migrates members. But like literally whenever I have any conversation, it always comes back to this. So essentially like this question typically comes in multiple like forms, right? So like you have the typical, do you have the right to work in the UK question? Another version of that is, when they add more adjectives that you can't necessarily kind of easily circumvent, which is, do you have the permanent right to work in the UK? Or sometimes even like covering, like a timeline that makes it a little bit tricky in terms of how do you approach this question when, for example, they explicitly ask, do you or will you in the future require sponsorship? So essentially, regardless of like the flavor of this question that you get, I think there are some kind of first principle rules that we always recommend that you guys follow. And the first one is definitely to answer this question in a very literal sense. Like if essentially like it comes in a specific format, only answer that specific format. And in answering that format of the question, make sure that you are honest when it comes to your specific situation. However, alongside being honest, it's very important for you to bear in mind what you're optimizing for. And this essentially depends mainly on your visa status. And that's why, so I have put together what I like to call our migrates decision tree, which depending on your visa status, it really helps you with just having a very consistent process in terms of how you approach this question. So if you're outside the UK or on a skilled worker visa, the answer to this question is always a yes, because unfortunately you cannot afford to be in a gray area. And like being on a graduate visa, for example, during your last 6 months. And this is like more of a kind of a flexible period because it really depends on what it is that you're trying to optimize for, whether it is getting interviews or actually making sure that you're not wasting your time. And so like really depending on where you are in that process, you can have, the option to either answer yes or no. And finally, if you are on your student visa or during the first 18 months of your graduate visa, then answer no. Because again, here, the focus should be on you giving yourself an initial shot rather than closing that opportunity off. And yeah, so this is what has worked so far. And I highly recommend that you follow this and just to kind of take that mental burden off of essentially like your mind when you're going through answering this specific question. However, thank you, Karina. It's very important and crucial to understand the employer's perspective actually when sponsoring, and the reason why they even put that question actually to potentially filter out candidates. And yeah, and this essentially brings us to our next section, which is why companies typically hesitate to sponsor. And this is really important for you guys to understand because as candidates, we're so far removed from like how recruiters and employers typically think about things that oftentimes you guys do not have the awareness or like the language to be able to understand why that question exists to begin with. Yeah, so typically the reasons why companies won't sponsor, like they come, they're articulated in different forms and ways, but ultimately it all boils down to one, either cost, two, admin overload, three, having internal policies, and four, the lack of knowledge. Yeah, so what does that essentially like leave you with in terms of like how you approach this? And in this case, I really want you to make sure that you're very much focused and intentional about your responsibility when you go through this process, which is literally information gathering. In that process of information gathering, your goal is literally to identify the objection so that later on you are able to address it. So what that essentially really means is that in a very common example, such as when the employer just tells you, unfortunately, we do not sponsor for this role, typically what we really want you to do here, which unfortunately not many people do, is just lead with the why. You really need to have this consistent response to whenever you get a rejection, to not take that as like the final answer, but create an opening by starting with asking the question why back. And typically, yeah, so how does this play out when it comes to like in real life? So there are like two typical and common use cases. The first one is via email. So for example, here you can see one way of doing it, which is, initially when a recruiter sends you an email and they ask for your visa status, and then you answer and you tell them your visa status, do not just leave it at that. Whether they ghost you, whether they come back to you and they tell you that actually sponsorship is not on the table, always make sure that you are following up and making sure that you are, like doing that by giving them a few prompts. Like, for example, here, it is mentioned, like I know that typically this means more logistical work and extra cost for a company. Is that actually the reason? Just to kind of get them going. And sometimes they will get back to you, sometimes they won't. But in terms of your own responsibility and like what falls within your remit, it's to always consistently ask that and get into that habit. Now, another use case where typically this happens is like over the phone, right? So look, you are like during an HR screening, or even if you have like a first interview with a hiring manager, and typically the sponsorship question comes up and they tell you, oh, unfortunately, like sponsorship is not something that we can offer, or I'm not really too sure about that, or I need to check, or whatever it is. And I think here really, while I think sometimes the human reflex is to kind of, feel a little bit constricted and like feel a contraction and just leave it at that. But really what we want you to do here is, again, make sure that you are asking that why. And typically over the course of a verbal conversation, a key expression that there is one takeaway when it comes to this section that I want you to have is this expression of out of curiosity, which truly takes the edge off. But more importantly, it just kind of opens the conversation, like after what could feel like just a hard no. And as soon as you do that and you essentially like ask that, please do not, like, I know it can be a little bit like uncomfortable, but do not say anything Do not, try to fill in the gaps. This is like where the second most important step comes in, which is you active listening. You want to listen actively to what they're going to tell you and be very present and just make notes of everything that they're going to tell you. Because essentially, like, it is this process and crucial important step that key to the next stage, which essentially is how to convince employers to sponsor. And Karina, over to you.
I know that, some people might be saying as well I just wanted to touch on this really quickly with well, I will ask a why and I won't get a response. That's fine. That's okay because you're still going and asking why and you're still trying to gather that data. We've had a lot of members who have gotten answers as a result of that and they've been able to explain things, tell them about, what actually sponsorship entails and convince them otherwise. We will also come back to this on why companies sponsor. And sometimes, rejection is just part of the process as well. So sometimes they will say to you, it's due to sponsorship, but potentially that is the easiest thing for them to say. Unfortunately, that does also happen. People will just say, yeah, sorry, we don't sponsor because they don't want to deal with it telling you, oh, sorry, this is the actual feedback as to why we're rejecting you. Let's talk about how to convince employers to sponsor. So who here knows what 3C leave is? So basically majority of people are going to say no, which is great because that kind of is going to prove my next point. Okay, what about how much it would cost a small business to get their sponsor license and your visa? Do you know how much this costs in total? Right.
Yep,
What about the minimum salary threshold? So we've covered that. What if you're a new entrant? Do you know how much your salary threshold should be if you're a new entrant? Do you know how much you need to get paid if you're a new entrant? Do you even know what the new entrant is? 31K, cool. 30,000, yeah, okay, good. People know that. That's good. And what if you're on a skilled worker visa since pre-2024? Do you know how much you need to get paid then? 28K, 38K. Okay, I'm just going to very, very briefly tell you what these things are. Very briefly, I can go into it. We go into it in depth within Migrates. 3C leave allows you to stay in the UK legally on a previous immigration status as part of, whilst you're waiting for a new visa. A small business is going to cost them exactly, I think it's £4,350. We use our own calculator to calculate this, but it's going to be roughly around the 3 to 4K ballpark. This minimum salary threshold, if you're not a new entrant or exempt from the salary, it's 38K. If you're a new entrant, those answers were correct. It's 30,900. Yeah. And what if you're on a skilled worker visa since pre-2024? You're also going to be able to access on a lower entrance salary. So if you don't know the answers to these questions, you cannot negotiate visa sponsorship. Like that is just the bare minimum. You have to know all the answers. You have to know everything about this process. And I want you to preface this. I'm not an immigration advisor. I do not give legal advice. We do have lawyers that we work with within Migrates. However, I am not a legal advisor, but all of this information is publicly available to you. When negotiating visa sponsorship, the most important thing is that you become the specialist. You have to be the person that convinces the employer. You have to know more than the employer on the whole process. And what is the second most important thing? What do you think people think the second most important thing is? Yeah, it's to show your value. Once you know all of that information, no one's going to be asking you that on the spot. I tell this a lot to Migrates members. When you are interviewing, no one in the room knows that you need a visa apart from you, unless you're coming in from outside of the UK or you're on a skilled worker looking to switch. You're the only person that knows your own situation. But there are still objections to negotiate. So situation, you're currently unemployed on a student visa, a post-study visa, an HPI visa, a youth mobility scheme visa with only 12 plus months left. If you're currently unemployed, these are your key pointers. You need to be focusing on companies. You need to just be trying to get a job. If a company doesn't have a sponsor license, that's okay because you can convince the business to get their license whilst you're working there. We've seen it happen many times for many of our members. If they are working somewhere, but they're going to get they're building a relationship with people within the business. Yeah, so you need to discuss your right to work when you get the job offer. I wouldn't recommend talking about it before. Like I said, you are the only person that's thinking about your right to work. The employer is thinking, is this person the right candidate and the right fit for the business? Another thing is asking for a performance and review post probation, and that is your opportunity to start discussing sponsorship. Don't leave it to the last minute. Don't leave it that you're 9 months into the role and that's when you decide to talk about it. Try to speak about it within the 3 to 6 month period that you have started the job there. So that's if you are currently unemployed and you're getting into a job or a job interview. And ensure you become invaluable. And like I said, this is not something that I can actually teach on this call. This is something that we help within Migrates, but it is very important given that people, like I said, businesses will sponsor for the right candidate, for the right talent. And in order to be the right candidate and the right talent, that's not something that we can teach on a 3-day workshop, unfortunately. However, if you're currently employed on any of these visa categories, your key pointers is that you need to advocate for yourself and also have someone within the business that you can trust, that you can speak to about this. I wouldn't recommend HR. I would recommend a manager, the business director, anyone that is, someone a bit more senior than you. You need to present a business case. And again, this is something that we will discuss later in the call. But you also need to know the process inside out, which is very important for anyone in any part of their journey. If you're outside of the UK, this is the reality. They will only sponsor you if you're the right fit for the role. You have to wow them in the interview. You have to be the best candidate. Like they have to remember you for days on end. And again, that's something that we teach inside of Migrates. And you need to be an immigration specialist because rules are different when you are applying from outside of the UK versus within the UK. Just to give you guys an indication, Paula, it took her 4 years. She was looking for a job with sponsorship. She joined Migrates. She got sponsored within a 4-month period, I want to say. She might correct me though if she's on the call. Alyssa was in the US, was looking for 9 months. So we've got examples of people. It takes time. For some people, it happens faster. For Natalia from Finland, it happened within 2 months. For Renee, it happened within 9 months as well. So it does take more time if you're outside the UK. And if you're on a skilled worker visa with 1+ year, these are the things you need to understand. You have to be networking. You have to be meeting people outside of your business in different sectors, your competitors. You need to get a stack of recruiters that you speak with, and you have to harass them. This is something that we also have resources on within Migrates, like how to actually talk to recruiters and how to get their attention. But you need to make sure that you're doing that. I also want to just make a point of talking about what happens when you're on a skilled worker visa looking for another job. So again, I'm not an immigration advisor, but if you, let's say, lose your job, the UK Home Office your employer has to let the UK Home Office know. The UK Home Office then will have to send you a letter to tell you that you have to vacate the UK. My cousin, who is Russian, she has been looking for 11 months, and she has not. She has been made redundant for 11 months. She's still in the UK. She's on 3C leave and she is not breaking her immigration status. She has not received the letter from the Home Office. It's a very anxiety inducing situation. My cousin works in a field which is very hard to get sponsored in. And, I mean, she's someone that I've helped a lot. And it might just be the case that she might not be able to get that job in the UK because it's a very niche specific job that they're just not really hiring for at the moment. So that is something that I want you guys to understand is that like if you are currently have the time on your visa, you have to take days off. Like I used to do that. Take days off from your job. Don't go on vacation. Don't go on holiday. Spend hours meeting people, networking, making meeting people in real life, building those connections, building those relationships, because those are the ways that you're going to get that job. It's through that networking piece when you already have the skilled worker visa. That's how I got my second skilled worker visa job through a recruiter. I got my third skilled worker visa job through myself. However, I was already networking and meeting people and interviewing with other employers. So I knew that, I would have to kind of, so that I would have to kind of go through the process with one of those companies. Okay, and this is where you need the Migrates assets. So we have actually built all of this. So there is a sponsorship negotiation email that we have built that you can use if you join Migrates. You can use it while you're interviewing. It clarifies every single point as to, why a company needs to sponsor, how they sponsor, how much it costs to sponsor. We've created all of these materials. People use this all the time. They give us great feedback on it. People have landed interviews and job offers through using our assets. The same thing is with the sponsorship negotiation script. So this is a 8-page script that I wrote. that is about how to exactly deal with the situation when you are employed and you need to discuss sponsorship with your current employer. So it's really important that you kind of use the script to have that conversation with your manager or with the director of the business. But again, it allows you to really position yourself as someone that is going to hopefully build a case for sponsorship. And then we've also created the calculator. So the calculator will actually, we've created it so that it calculates the exact cost that it will cost for your for the license, if they need a license, for the COS, for the health surcharge, for the visa, and for your own visa as well. So we've created all of these for,
Karina, do you think
yeah,
it's worth if like I quickly screen share and
I
just
can
share?
share it. I can
Okay,
share what
if you
this
have
one.
it open, that would be
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Because
I
I
mean,
think we had like a few questions early on about people asking, where did you get this figure? Where did you? And I think this was the whole point of us creating this very important resource that is very popular amongst like our members when it comes to usage, because this is like literally the one source of truth that you need. You can pick all the different like options that could potentially apply. And then actually what you can do is generate a range. So whether a company has a license or not. The size of the company is really important. Whether they have had like initial COS stashes before or not. Whether the employee is essentially applying from outside or inside the UK. The duration of the COS. If there's like any priority service or not. If you're switching from a student visa directly or not. Because all of these are like the different elements that actually go into coming up with the cost. And this calculator is kept up to date, and like you guys can use it to come up exactly with those figures, so that like when you have that conversation with your employer, you can share like up-to-date information and you can really give them the exact information that they need. Thank you, Karina, for that.
No worries. Yeah. Rim built it. That's why it's great to have a data scientist co-founder, amongst other reasons. So, and the reality is that, yes, you do need our help because we've become the trusted advisors in this space and we work with employers and talent alike. So this is some examples of things that we've been doing. So, for example, we've had recruitment firms reach out to us and ask us to build them materials to give their companies that they work with information on why they should sponsor international talent. So we've done this. We've helped recruitment firms do this. This happened earlier last year. The next thing is we actually talk to these employers as well. So this happened literally right after the Friday session. You can see the date, 21st of February, 2025. Sorry, I'm not going to click into it because that needs to be blurred out. So we had a member that needed us to speak to her employer on her behalf about the cost and the process and what it entails. And I had an hour-long conversation. I created materials off the back of it. And we shout out the bad behavior, like not saying that this employer was doing that because they weren't, but we are there to educate companies on why they should sponsor international talent. And we are building a network of employers. We have people that we know. We have placed people in companies that we know because we're trying to change the way that these things are happening. But the reality is that if you don't know how to answer those questions, the ones that we were going through at the very in 44 and in 44 and yeah, in these slides, if you don't know what a COS is, if you don't know how much you need to be paid, if you don't know all of these different questions, like you need to know this information in order to be able to actually negotiate the sponsorship. Like that is so important. And it is available online. Like you can educate yourself without our help. That's not what we're trying to say. But you have to know this information. And unfortunately, I only have like an hour and I don't have enough time to run through every single case and use study that has occurred and would occur as part of your journey to land a visa sponsored job. So okay, cool. So we're now going to go into what it means to be the right candidate and get the sponsorship.
Absolutely. And I think it's very important, like as Karina mentioned, to really make sure that you do position yourself as that. And this is like the very reason why our workshop has been structured the way it has been, because day and one essentially have been really crucial in teaching you guys the most important bits, so that you essentially place yourself and you give yourself all the chances that you need to be that like top one choice candidate. So if we go to the next Yeah, exactly. So the reality is that actually employers will sponsor you if you are the right fit. Karina always says this thing that the only person thinking about sponsorship, it's like the candidate, it's us, because what's top of mind for the employer, it's finding the right talent. And it can be really hard for us to kind of approach it that way. But that's literally how an employer thinks about it. And when it comes to the right fit, we have three different bits that go into that. The first one is definitely the culture fit, the personality fit, I believe, and most importantly, the skills fit as well. So what that essentially translates into, yeah, so you do prove that value by essentially virtue signaling, which was the very focus of day two. And also part of it like during day one. So it always starts with an effective CV. We have covered that at length in day one. Here I essentially shared again Margot's CV, which I think is really important to kind of, again, like highlight what worked and what didn't. So please watch back the recording, very, very important. So that's kind of one, your CV, extremely important. This obviously is always followed by an optimized LinkedIn because oftentimes you are being cross-referenced. Day one, Karina did a whole fantastic session on this. We actually did like a bunch of different examples and like a kind of a section by section of like the do's and the don'ts and what like the first principles are. And here we have Kelly's optimized LinkedIn. She was also another success story. She was able to essentially find her role in less than 4 months. So CV, definitely your LinkedIn, but then it does not end there. There's obviously the personality and the culture fit aspect, and this comes through in how you are creatively outreaching, which was a huge part of what we did yesterday, and also just sprinkling throughout your value and articulating that in a very clear, concise way, which is what we covered yesterday. And that obviously goes again in your creative outreach, but most importantly in your interview performance. So yesterday, please make sure that you rewatch the section with like Maureen. She is a very knowledgeable person, one of our highly knowledgeable coaches inside Migrates. And she shared this like amazing framework. And we got actually a lot of great feedback on the session yesterday. So something for you to play with just to, again, articulate that value, know exactly how to talk about yourself, how to talk about your experience, how everything kind of really weaves into the special, unique profile that you are. And I think, yeah, what's really important is to kind of also see like how this like played out in actual real life examples, which is what Karina will do next.
Yeah, so I want to talk to you guys a little bit about Kian. So Kian was on a graduate visa. He actually joined another community which hustles a lot, and and we actually pitched him to our friend's startup, which it was like, well, he wasn't actually like a friend; it was just a founder that we knew, and he was a great candidate and got his skilled worker visa in on the 30th of December. So he was the right fit because I knew that this founder had been looking for someone in like a very kind of junior role to assist him with a lot of founder associate responsibilities, but also be doing like a bit of marketing, a bit of everything. And the founder had a very like small startup; it wasn't a big one, but I pitched him forward, and he did it kind of he did it himself. Like he didn't have it just by me. He did completely like go through the process, applied, spoke to the founder himself, and he pitched himself as being the right candidate. Of course, I knew why, what the founder was looking for, but even still, Kian went above and beyond. Like he sent him like this presentation. He used it as like with unprompted. No one asked him to do that. He did it himself, and he really positioned himself as being a great talent. And as a result, that is what happened, and that's how he got the skilled worker visa. And then I also want to talk about Catherine, who is going to be joining us on this call very shortly. So Catherine was on the graduate visa. She had less than 2 years of experience. She was a super strong interview candidate, and she actually convinced the employer to get their license to sponsor her. And to me, I mean, like, I I loved working with Catherine. I think that Catherine was one of the most like incredible, resilient people I have ever met. I'm so excited for her to also speak about her journey in a few minutes because she really like she did not stop at anything. Like she went into every interview, every kind of every time that she applied for a job, she was so resilient and so like passionate about every job that she applied to. She was creative with her approach. She used all of the feedback that I was giving her and actually, went and actioned it. And that is how she managed to get a job at this company. They went through the process of getting their sponsor license for her, and she's now working there as a marketing executive. She is truly, truly phenomenal. Um, so yeah, and I think that kind of brings us to our next point. And I think I also want to just, I want to reiterate, there's a lot of information when it comes to sponsorship negotiation, and we cannot cover it all. Like there's a lot. You need to know so many different things about your immigration status, about where to find jobs, about how to network, about how to position yourself. But it is all kind of like a puzzle that comes together, and in order to really be successful in this process, you have to be using all of the methods in order to make it happen. And I talk a little bit about this inside of Migrates. I've also talked about it in my own content. You have to almost manifest the visa. Now, I know that that sounds a little bit wishy-washy and very kind of new age, but you have to truly be delusional in your belief that you're going to get that job and that you're going to get that job with sponsorship. And that belief is what's going to drive you forward. Um, so yeah, I think that is, kind of hopefully giving you guys a bit of an indication around what's possible and also what you need to be doing in order to get those interviews, do well in those interviews, and also be able to position yourself as someone who is worthy of sponsorship. Awesome. I am going to ask our success stories to come up. Hi, Catherine. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. It's good to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your Sunday. Thank you, all three of you, for taking the time out of your Sunday to just tell a little bit about your journeys. Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and what your journey has looked like?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you, Rim and Karina, for inviting me, and thank you everyone for joining. Hope you're having a very beautiful Sunday. So I'm Catherine. I come from Vietnam. I came to the UK 3 years ago on a student visa. And then in 2021, I graduated from Leeds Beckett University. And since then, I started my job hunting journey on my graduate visa. So at first, I landed a job in an agency, but then I kind of, FYI, I worked in marketing. And um, after graduated, I think 6 months, I landed a role in an agency, advertising agency. But then after working for like 3 months, 4 months, I realized that agencies is not really what I'm looking for my career. So I quit the job and then looking for something in more of like corporate company kind of situation, branding situation here. And I landed a job at the Body Shop. I worked there as an e-commerce coordinator, and after I think a beautiful 8 months, 9 months working at the Body Shop, unfortunately we came through an administration, and the whole team got made redundant. I think early last year. Correct me if I'm wrong. I couldn't have the timeline
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
clear in my head. Maybe early last year. And then at that time, I was basically negotiating my visa sponsorship with the Body Shop already. So we really early on the stage, but then receiving the redundant situation really knocked me down. At that time, I really, really wanted to kind of go back to my hometown because I just feel like everything collapsed. Like you landed a job, you're negotiating your visa situation, but then all of your effort just got drowned to the drain overnight. So it's not really a nice situation at all. But then I came across to Karina TikTok. Hello. Um, and I heard about her stories. I heard about how she and Rim kind of started Migrate. Migrates back then was really, really new, right? You guys just started, I think. How do you want to tell your stories? How you want to help immigrants to achieve their dreams and all of that. So I really feel inspired, and I think let's give it another shot. Let's connect to Karina. Let's see how can I kind of navigate through this difficulty of my life. And then I reached out to Karina, talked to her. we worked together very closely for that time. And fast forward, I think 4 months later, I have my first interview with my current company, Attraction Tickets. And then at that time, they haven't had their sponsor license yet. So me and Karina kind of worked together in terms of like how to negotiate them to believe that I am a very good applicant, a very good future employees. And then after I got into the very last round of the interview, we worked together in terms of like working out what is needed to be done for the whole process of licensing obtained, sponsoring situation, and then I finally got my what is called a contract of like I'm going to sponsor you, I'm going to bring you into the business, and voila, I'm here with my skill worker visa. So yeah, that's my story.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I can't wait to just see you and give you a big hug because I feel like you really like your story was so inspiring and you went through redundancy and then you got the interview and then you managed to convince them and they were so like they loved you from the interview process. I remember how much they were saying that like you were such a great candidate. So it's all testament to you and your hard work. So thank you so much for sharing your story and yeah, like I mean, I know you're in the migrates community, so people will connect with you if they're in the community as well. But yeah, thank you for sharing your story, and yeah, I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you so much, guys. If you have any question, let me know. Or if you want to connect through LinkedIn, shoot me any message. Please feel free to.
Thanks, Catherine. And then I'm going to go to Paula, and then I'm going to come back to Mahima. So Paula, hi.
Hello.
Hi.
We haven't spoken in ages, but
I know,
hi.
hi. Also, this gif at the end of your journey is exactly how I felt and how both Rim and I felt when you got your sponsorship status because it was a journey. So do you want to
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yes, a longer journey for me, but a happy ending in the end. So yeah, hi everyone. My name is Paula. I am from Colombia. I did my master's at the University of Nottingham. However, when I was a student, there wasn't a graduate visa. So it was very hard to find a sponsor role while I was a student. So as soon as I graduated, the UK politely asked me to leave the country and go back to Colombia. So yeah, I came back to Colombia where I decided to build a career in paid media. However, I was still applying to jobs in the background, but I never had any luck. I didn't even get a single interview in the UK. It was tons of rejection emails. So I decided to give it a break because it had been years and years trying to move back to the UK. And I had never even spoken to a recruiter back then. So I think I was at a stage where I thought, okay, this will never happen for me, especially since I wasn't in the UK and I didn't have, any networking. I didn't know anybody who could help me move to the UK. So I thought, yeah, this is a lost cause. I'll just give up completely. And yeah, one day I came across Karina's videos in Migrates. They really resonated with everything that I had been experiencing. So I decided to contact her. I joined, I think, one of the first webinars about negotiating your visa. And I want to say it was such an eye opener for me about how little to nothing I knew about getting sponsored in the UK. So yeah, after I joined that webinar, I joined Migrates. I had one-on-ones with Reem and Karina, and they really changed the game for me. I think that I really learned that it wasn't so much about my experience because I had all the skills and I had the CV, and still I wasn't getting any calls from anyone. So it was more about having a strategy behind those applications and optimizing my CV, my LinkedIn, preparing for interviews. And I think also how to put myself in front of recruiters. That was, I want to say, the big secret of this story. So yeah, once I understood how to get noticed, I finally got my first interview. And yeah, I want to say after 3 months, I finally got the job offer and moved back to the UK.
So happy to have you here, and thank you, Paula. Yeah, I think your story has been like just so amazing, given how long I know you tried to come to the UK, and I'm glad you've made it happen. and the future is very bright for you. So I'm so glad to have you be part of Migrates as well. I know that we've become like online friends, but yeah, it's great to see you and to have you with us. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
And then I think last but definitely not least is Mahima, whose story I think will really resonate with a lot of people, given how she had, was it less than 3 months? I just want to make sure, because I was saying that, but then I was like, was it 4? How many months did you have in the end?
Yeah, I had around 4 months left on my visa, out of which 1 month was my brother's wedding. So yes, 3 months technically till I had to get a job. But yeah, I can quickly go over my story. I would say it's quite similar to Catherine and Paula's, but I feel I just had slightly lesser time. I was working at Open Health for around 12 to 15 months when I realized that they weren't going to sponsor me. The business wasn't doing very well. So I had started applying for jobs January 2024, I would say, but I was just applying blindly without having any strategy. And there was this workshop that was hosted by Rim and Karina, and I came across Karina and Rim's profile on TikTok as well. And then I joined the workshop, which gave me a lot of insights on how to speak to my current employer and also how to start looking for other jobs. And I think 3 or 4 months after that, I was made redundant, and that's when I joined Migrates. So from then, I just started applying. I focused a lot on quantity, I would say, in the first few months, but towards the end, I just started focusing on quality. And this was kind of my last interview that I was going to do. And then I think I would have, in my head, I was like, I'm not going to give up, but realistically, I knew that I didn't really have time. I remember Karina even asked me once, do you have a plan B? And I was like, no, I think this is going to work. So I would say sometimes you have to be a bit delusional and you just have to think it's going to work, because I feel like if you have that inside voice which is saying that it is going to work, then it will. And for me, I got rejected by a lot of companies just at the final round because of my visa sponsorship. But I think being part of Migrates really helped me lead the conversation and reassure the companies that I know how to do it. Although I wouldn't say I knew exactly what the sponsorship process would be like, but I had a good idea by conversations that we had had in the community. I had spoken to Karina and Jim separately, so I had a fairly good idea, and I feel like that was something that my employer saw, and they were reassured that I could help them because they didn't know how to do it. They had a sponsorship license, but they didn't know anything about it. So December was a difficult month for me when I was figuring it out and helping them do it. But yeah, I think if you just put yourself forward and say, yes, I know how to do it, and try to learn how to do it, that's something that really helps and is an advantage over other candidates who might just be like, oh, sorry, we don't know how to do it, but we need to get sponsored. And I think that's something that Migrates really helped me with.
Yeah, you've been like, I also felt really passionate about your situation because obviously I have a PR background, and like I could see how you were such a good candidate and it just wasn't working for that period of time. But I'm so glad that you had the Delulu kind of outlook, because I really think that it led you into this job as well. And yeah, I mean, like, kudos to you. And I think I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person as well, Mahima. So we're going to be announcing something at the end of the call for everyone, but our Migrates alumni are like still very much people that we care about and that we want to help, if it's even, a case of like getting more advice about their situation. So you're kind of part of our little family, which will hopefully get bigger if we succeed our goals this year. Thank you so much for your time, Mahima. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time out of your Sunday to talk about your stories as well. It's really, really appreciated. Cool. I am just going to go into the final bits before we can kind of do our Q&A. So we are on a mission to help 500 members. So we are on a mission to help 500 members land sponsored roles in 2025. We've helped 50 people so far. We want you to be part of the next 450 people. That is our goal for this year. But what sets us apart? So we're going there. You guys probably are aware of some of these other players in the market. We've got a few of their logos. We've got International Hustlers, we've got Bicera, and we've got Get Sponsored. And I want to just preface this by saying something very important. If you decide to have someone help you on this journey, please do the due diligence and make sure the person you are working with has actually been sponsored multiple times and has got settled status through this process. And I am saying that for every single company that exists out in this world that says that they're going to help international talent. I'm telling you to read between the lines, look into these companies, look into the people, and understand who has actually gone through this process multiple times and has been sponsored and also gotten PR off the back of it. So what sets us apart? We offer, personal CV and LinkedIn reviews, which many others do as well. We do mock interview prep. We've got weekly webinars and guest speakers every single week within Migrates. I don't think that the others do. We have got sponsored coaches. So all of our coaches and the people that help our Migrates members have been through this process or are actually, one of our coaches is currently sponsored. So she does also help our members. We have a job board that shows the sponsorship status. So as I said, it's a little bit different to the other job boards that are out there. We have a sponsorship negotiation kit, and we have helped 50 people land visa sponsored roles. Well, nearly 50, we're at like 49. So we're one off. Helped them land visa sponsored roles in the UK. We also provide legal support to employers, and we are one of the few that has Trustpilot. So please also look at our reviews, get a sense of what we're like, and get a sense of how people view us as well. So that is my biggest advice to you: is whoever, if you decide to help get someone's professional help, whether it's us, whether it's International Hustlers, whether it's Sarah, whether it's Get Sponsored, just remember to do the research and look into what you're actually going to be giving your money for. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you inside Migrates. And if not, we'll see you around. The WhatsApp group is free to be in, and yeah, it's a community in and of itself that we will continue to keep up. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Really, really enjoyed it.
And let's make 2025 the year you guys land a sponsored job. We are on a mission to help 500 people get sponsored this year. We are not playing about that. So yes, please keep up the energy, whether you join us now or later, or we understand that sometimes, financially it cannot always be possible, and we try our best. But let's absolutely make sure that 2025 is the year you're making meaningful strides towards this goal. Thank you everyone for tuning in for all the 3 days. I've met so many new people, and I'm so happy that our community is growing. So yeah, thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.